What's going on, guys? Christian Shaw here, and you're listening to the Becoming Bankable podcast. On this episode, we're going to be interviewing Steve Campana of HonCamp PC, which is a top 10 Midwest CPA and business advisory firm, and they specialize in helping companies in construction, real estate, dental practices, home health care, restaurants, manufacturing and distribution, and more get their finances right so that they can grow their business profitably and successfully. Listen in on this awesome podcast with Steven.
Geometry and accounting in high school, you asked me how did I get into my business, and they both made sense because proof theorems in geometry and accounting, you knew if you had the right answer or not because the books had to balance, and it just really clicked with me, and pursued it in college. I always playing basketball outside, someone said you should be a CPA. I had no idea what a CPA was, but I was going to be one.
Wow.
And so I received my academic education at a local university, and I did incredibly well. I lived at home with no distractions, and then I transferred to a large university in our state, which looked like a foosball table in our dorm room, the pool hall on the way to class, and live music starting on Thursday afternoon.
What university was that?
It's the University of Iowa in Iowa City, about an hour from my home, and those things were quite an academic distraction. So I lacked academic bearing. And in 1980, there were thousands of us going into accounting, and it was just a very popular field. I missed the boat, so I didn't get hired. And I was fortunate. I continued to, I had that goal. I was going to be a CPA. I didn't know how, where, or why, but I was going to do it. And I finally met a recruiter for a very large regional firm that interviewed me, and he told me the reality of my grades and said, but I tell you what, Steve, you're a personable young man. I cannot guarantee you a job, but if you pass the exam, I will get you an interview in an operating office, because we do hire a lot of, the people with the big grade points. We're experiencing that some of them just aren't putting the effort into passing the exam. So if you show that effort and get that. So that's how my career got started.
Oh, okay. And how did your business get started when you first created your own firm?
Well, let's do this in two steps. One is my public accounting career over 43 years. It was 15 years with the firm I just described that did offer me a job after the interview. Spent 14 years there, 7 as a partner. Then worked 20 years for a 4-owner CPA firm, 4 owners. I was one of the owners, and we grew up from 14 to about 35 or 40 people. And over that 20 years, we 4 or 5x'd our revenue. And then the 3 of us were 55 and 1 was 34, and I kind of helped, the partners got together. We knew we needed an succession plan. So 8 years ago, we merged with the largest firm in the state of Iowa, and we've been there 8 years. And I'm retiring from being embedded inside of a large CPA firm. So when you refer to Campana Performance Coaching,
yes,
that's a journey on itself.
I understand. Okay, now I'm understanding better. Okay,
so Campana Performance Coaching is very serendipitous. Anything I've ever done, I've ended up teaching, and so I'm a certified billiard instructor. Well, I don't teach, and I've never really tried to make a business out of it. I love teaching others. And I watched the podcast, if you will, just like this. And the pool player being interviewed gave a shout out to a book called With Winning in Mind.
With Winning in Mind.
With Winning in Mind, written by an Olympic champion, Lanny Bassam. And Christian, I've been reading mental management sports stuff since 1979, when I think Jim Lohr published the book Mental Toughness Training for Sports. And Lanny's book was one of the best I'd ever seen on the topic. And so I called Lanny, and just to tell him that, hey, this is a great book and everything. Well, we just clicked, and he's done the coaching himself. He's an Olympic gold champion, and he won the gold medal in 76, and he would tell you it's because he choked in 72. So he spent from 72 to like 75 interviewing all of the gold medal winners in non-rifle shooting sports, because he knew it wasn't his technical skills. And he developed an approach that applied to sporting activities, but it also applies to life and business, called mental management systems. And he has a process to certify coaches. We talked about that. I became one of his certified coaches. So that's what led to the concept of starting Campana Performance Coaching. And I will work with successful entrepreneurs and high-performing individuals who are overworked, overwhelmed, plateaued, and feeling stuck. Help them rediscover their clarity so that they can go further, faster than they would. So that's the concept, but it is in its infancy. I am retiring from the public accounting firm at the end of the year, and then that business, it's working at the conference you and I were both at, it's still taking shape, and I'm excited about getting that started.
That's a really exciting new chapter in your career. I just want to go back to your experience at the CPA firm to pass on to the wisdom to the listeners right now, those business owners and new business owners that are just getting things started. From a CPA standpoint and perspective, what would you recommend for business owners who are just getting started, who are undercapitalized, who are trying to access working capital to grow their business or even start their business? What insights or wisdom can you pass on to them?
Very important to the vision and having a business plan. And this may sound funny, but a speaker recently said, never build a website until you know you have a business, which many people do. They have this idea, but they've never tested it. They don't know whether they even have someone that's willing to pay for what they're selling. So while there are many books and you can write a crazy detailed business plan, it doesn't have to be that long. It's, what's your idea? Let them know, who your customers are, where their customers are, what value you bring, why people would buy from you instead of someone else. So that when I go into you as a banker, I don't say, Christian, I'm starting Campana Performance Coaching. What's it going to do? Well, it's in its infancy. I'm not quite sure. You've actually put together a business plan. Ideally, you would put together what that's going to look like if you hit your expectations from a financial perspective over the next 3 to 5 years. And there are many people, CPAs are particularly well gifted at helping you craft at least the financial model for what that looks like.
Got it. So
you need a business plan.
Right. At least a 3 to 5 year business plan that you can show a banker or an institution that you can show them, here's what our projections would look like, so that they would give you, a chance to.
And so that they really know what's your need and why do you have it? Because the need for funding could be, if you're a capital intensive company that maybe needs to buy a fleet of delivery trucks, those are much easier to finance than, well, people aren't going to pay me for 60 days and I have to have 2 months of inventory on hand. Those are that's part of working capital, but as a general rule, bankers will loan 75 or 80% of receivables that are not over 90 days old, and 40 to 50% of your inventory that's not obsolete. So that's called a working capital line of credit. So that's what that financial projection model will help you show. Look, we're going to be carrying this much inventory. Our customers are typically going to pay us in 30 days, or they're going to pay us in 10 days, or we're working with big industrial accounts, and we'll get the business and we'll get our profit margin, but they pay in 90 days. And so if it takes you 90 days to collect your money, the bank needs to finance that 90-day gap. So being able to show them that and with the help of your other advisors, CPA, this is why we need this line of credit, this is what we'll secure it by, and a small business, you need to be prepared to sign a personal guarantee.
Gotcha. I want to go back to the example that you just mentioned, the example of the trucking company. We have a lot of trucking and transportation companies looking for lending, looking to get either their first truck or their second or third to expand their fleet. And it's very relevant for that type of business owner. Could you just reemphasize again why it was really important for the trucking company to have that deal or accounts receivable from a client that's willing to pay them to secure that financing?
Well, bankers lend on collateral.
Yes. Okay.
Is that where you were heading with the question?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the truck, well, I said it was easier for the truck because that's an asset. And Christian, if your business isn't able to pay me, I can take that asset back as the banker, and there's a market for it. If you have a customer that's not paying and you got a business, it's much harder for the banker to go in. First of all, liquidate the inventory you have. They're not selling what you have. So it's a much riskier asset to finance. But if you don't get that financing, you could become cash poor and out of business because you haven't thought through, I've got this gap I need to fill. And as a rule, some businesses will have line of credits year in and year out because they're growing.
Yeah.
Bankers expect line of credits to rest. In other words, it's not evergreen, that you don't owe the bank $100,000 on your line of credit into perpetuity. If you're a seasonal business like retail, yes, you might need to borrow during the holiday season, or if if you have the seasonal type, if your customers buy seasonally, like a construction company, they might, when they start their work again in March, or a blacktop company, if they start their work in the spring, well, they've collected all the receivables from the work they did last year. They may need a line of credit for the first 3, 6, 7 months of the year. So that's the concept behind a line of credit. So it's, you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's the difference between the collateral the bank gets on a working capital line of credit is softer, harder for the bank to make good on, where the hard assets, whether it's real estate, which generally you want to own outside of your business, or the trucks are more concrete assets. It's easier to loan on them, and it's more comfortable for lending institutions to lend on hard assets than working capital, especially if we're talking about a startup business that that only has the model that he and I or the accountant and they put together. So.
Understood. Okay, last question. What are your thoughts on alternative financing products such as merchant cash advance, high interest loans to get, I know it's kind of like a general question, but a lot of people are only qualifying for these types of financial products. What are your general thoughts on that?
I will talk in general terms. So, and I think you're referring to two things. One would be the question that comes up a lot, and we'll start with the autos and trucks.
Okay.
Should I lease or buy? Okay, because you can borrow from the bank and have a 60-month repayment term, or you can lease and turn your, and you just walk away from the lease when you're done. And I have typically not thought about emphasize the tax differences between the two when I talk to clients, but the conversation goes, Christian, leasing is just another form of financing. It generally carries a higher interest rate. It's generally, if you're a startup, leasing might be an easier path to go, but you don't really see it, but if the accountant does the numbers for you, it's a higher interest rate.
A riskier bet.
Yeah, but if that works, like when you're starting up and the bank financing doesn't, there's nothing wrong with doing that. But if you're an established business, the way I generally describe that is leasing is another form of financing. Christian, if you're turning your fleet over every 3 years, in other words, it's not letting it fully depreciate out. If your delivery vehicle is really going to last and look good for you for 5 years, but you're the type of person that wants to turn it over every 3, leasing is generally a better way to go because you can just walk away in 3 years. Where if you bought the vehicle and tried to sell it or trade it in 3 years, you're going to be upside down versus just letting it straight away. So, different form of financing. If you're not going to keep the asset till its full economic life runs out, leasing is a very viable. In fact, we see companies where they have a fleet for their salespeople. They may purchase the truck fleet, but for the sales vehicles, they may lease those because they're turning them over quicker.
Interesting.
Was that helpful?
Yeah, very helpful. Thank you for the analogies and kind of like the comparisons. Very helpful examples. Well, thank you for your time, Steve. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for listening to that episode with Steve Campana on the Becoming Bankable podcast. Our mission is to provide entrepreneurs and aspiring business owners the resources, tips, strategies, and tricks to grow your business profitably and successfully. Listen in on the next episode and don't forget to subscribe.